through it, kind of come back with any additional updates from the groups or questions as we talk about kind of the feasibility of what's in here. Hoping that maybe we can get to a recommendation today. I'll just start with what was announced last night. The rec centers are off the table. And so any procurement process from the municipality will have to start over now, and that's some time. So I just want to be mindful of that. So this is really to review identified options for late September occupancy, given that the notice that went up in Centennial was for the end of the month closure, and the intent was to be able to turn something on by the 29th. Next slide, please. All right, so our projected need was 350 unsheltered individuals. But as we've discussed, not everyone's going to take advantage of shelter immediately. Some will wait until it's colder. Some will wait to hear what the conditions are like. Actually, that word of mouth is a really big piece to utilization when folks have been unsheltered. We've also talked about the Pfd Factor. So they're deposited on 9/20 electronically, and paper checks will be available the first week of October. So I think it's reasonable to assume a 75% or lower initial occupancy in the first couple of weeks. So I think that gets us 263. You're always welcome to check my math, always and forever. So you can check my math. So just reviewing where we're at. Task force. Oh yeah, go ahead, Owen. Thanks. Task force said 24-hour access, meals, showers. What we didn't firmly land on, but we've discussed is, do we want to require, say that there's a required use of HMIS, data entry, and room on site for a warming tent. As we come back into the discussion phase of this, those are questions I would like to see if we can reach consensus on. Yeah, you.
HMIS, what is that?
Homelessness. It's where we put people in to know where they're at.
Thank you.
And then there's that 150 limitation in Title 16. So I went back and reviewed that. So the language is there specifically. Emergency shelter locations activated under Title 16, this section shall be for no more than 150 clients in a single location without assembly approval. So I started reading that as hard and fast, and I wanted to flag that there is a bit of a caveat there without assembly approval. So we start with the assumption of no more than 150, and then if there needed to be more than 150, we would know that that was a condition. I think we were working with maybe too hard of a rule. So next slide, please. So let's start with the non-MLA sites, and I've captured some. So huge shout out to the facilities group who have really combed for kind of anything that could be around. I think it's fair to say no private locations are confirmed and ready for immediate lease to the MOA for non-congregate or congregate sheltering purposes. There are potential options, though, that could start at later dates, such as the Arctic Recreation Center, which has current programming, but they could be open to the conversation of a year lease with a later start. The former Alaska Native Charter School over on Burgaw. I actually spoke with one of their board members. The rent is $15,000 a month plus utilities, but they're still waiting on a few things. One is news on a potential purchase, and there's still some compatibility use issues that are unresolved, particularly there's a gym and classrooms, but there's no cafeteria space. There aren't a lot of congregate spaces in that building. So we would have to know more, in order to kind of really get a good ops or operations budget going. And I believe we're still investigating 5151 Fairbanks, which we need some more information about. So nothing like hard and fast to say, hey, MOA, you could lease this. This is what it would cost. This is when it would be available quite yet. Housing options are likely, but not immediately available either. November, December activation likely, if we're talking about any of if it's a hotel purchase or even a master lease of a hotel, we don't have a specifically identified location where an owner is ready to say yes now. So lots of potential, nothing definitive. On MLA sites, we talked about the recreation centers. There was a previously identified invitation to bid that was withdrawn yesterday by the mayor from consideration. The Bemboki Ice Arena is the current home of Wolverines hockey. There's the Dempsey Anderson Ice Arena, Sullivan Arena, Nina Center, Egan Centers, both which have current winter bookings. There's the Golden Lion Hotel, and this group has evaluated as a housing option assumptions, regarding non-congregate and MOA housing would apply in terms of our dollars, but we have no knowledge that that's like available tomorrow from, that's out of our control. All of those options though on the MOA sites meet our minimum emergency shelter task force criteria. So let's go forward, please. So we reviewed the budgets last time from the operating group. I just want to remind you that they're built on assumptions. We've stated those assumptions. Obviously, these assumptions may or may not apply based on how the municipality puts out whatever bidding documents it puts out or a request for proposals and the rough order of magnitude costs. And that's a term that's a little bit newer to me. Melinda, can you talk a little bit about what rough order magnitude costs mean?
Sure. And so I can speak from a construction standpoint, but I think the concept applies. You make a rough order of magnitude estimate when you still have a lot of uncertainty about what the final design is going to be and what the final parameters are going to be. And so you make some basic assumptions to the best of your ability to come up with an estimate. Typically in an engineered construction project, when you make this sort of an estimate, you're doing that when you only have about 30% design. So you have a lot of uncertainties. And we would typically say that the range of the actual project could come in anywhere from 25% lower than the estimate you give. So if you give $1 million estimate, it could be 750,000 up to twice that much. And you will hear some people talk about ROM and they'll change the upper end. Sometimes they'll say plus 50, but usually it's plus 50 to plus 100 is industry expectation. So if you have $1 million estimate, unfortunately, your final cost could be $1 million. I mean, could be 2 million. Can't do the math in my head.
That's all right. No, it's always cost more than you think. And
Yeah.
usually a lot.
And so I think in Meg's case, we probably have a little bit better than that typical 35% design. I think you're probably a little bit better than what I would call an ROM estimate at this point. You're probably at a conceptual estimate, which is more like, Bob, help me. Conceptual estimates are usually like minus 15 to plus 30.
Okay.
So typically a little better with conceptual estimates.
Okay, I will change the slide. I believe that, the conceptual estimate is probably, I just don't have the lingo.
Yeah.
So,
Good. Well, you're learning.
yeah, I am. So that didn't really translate in, viewing. It says rescinded.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to still talk about the rec centers because one of the reasons we evaluated them was because they met that 150 criteria that we thought was maybe more hard and fast than it actually has to be. We presume that you would have to turn on 2 locations to capture the full capacity at Centennial, if the approximately 200. The estimated cost per day was $100 per person per day. The costs for the operations in those types of buildings were fixed regardless of the census. And the MOA and their ITB invitation to bid said they would provide security at both locations. And they were both currently in use as recreation centers, but all of those were a variety of factors and things we looked at, and we did kind of build our congregate shelter budget around the idea of what might exist at a rec center. So, Kenny, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I was grateful to read the news article yesterday, but as predicted that it was indicated that the residents in the area for these rec centers opposed it vigorously. And so I just was hoping that we've done the same kind of work for any place that we're going to come up with so that we don't run into the same issue. And if we feel comfortable with that element of our choices and the selection too. So just want to make sure that we're not going to run into the similar roadblock.
Yeah, so we put, I think, man, it'll be up to the group by consensus, but I put rescinded as an option just because we know there couldn't be consensus from the municipality at this point for rec centers. But I do agree that any community impacts, I'm not sure they're necessarily in the purview of the task force, but I think they're worth acknowledging. We have a little bit more of a narrow charge in that we're trying to find a place for people to go. But it would be good for us to call out anything we can think of, so policymakers can consider those as factors in their decision. So this slide was the rec center budget. You would have needed 2 facilities. There's currently $1.2 million appropriated for shelter within Anchorage Health Department by the Assembly for cold winter costs. And this 2 rec center option would have cost about $2.7 million. And when I talk about those larger costs, it's for the 3 months of October to December, because we're in that 22 budget and in the 22 year. So that was the rec center option moving forward. Ben Boeke Ice Arena, it's previously been used as shelter. This is the layout of one of the rinks from before. There were 122 people per rink. So 2 rinks would be 244 people. The same, not rough order of magnitude now, conceptual costs, operating costs as a rec center. And it is currently the home of Wolverines hockey. So again, that's one of those community impacts called out. Next slide, yep, thank you. So then there's also Dempsey Anderson Ice Arena. So this was also previously used as a COVID-19 sheltering location. The layout from the previous use, I don't have a beautiful graph like Boeke, but it showed 102 individuals in each rink with 10-foot spacing because it was going to be used as quarantine and isolation and what's the other name I'm missing? There were 2 sites to it. One was quarantine and one was isolation. Sorry, I just mixed them together. 1 in each rink. So 2 rinks available for 204 or more capacity if you go to the 6-foot spacing, which is kind of the current rule of thumb for congregate sheltering. Cost of operations are fixed regardless of the census, unless 1 rink could be shut down when the census drops to a certain level. MLA could provide as much security as offered for the 2 rec centers. So in the invitations to bid, there was security offered for each building. So what if you took 2 buildings worth of security and put them at 1 location if you had a higher census? There's room for a warming tent in the parking lot. And I put that twice for some reason. Effects of late nights and early mornings. So, so quick costs on that, kind of working at that same $100 rate. It's about 1.352 million for 3 months. Interestingly, if we turn on 1 facility above the 150 threshold, that will capture what we believe is the initial threshold of people taking advantage of shelter. We only have the facilities cost for 1 facility. Dempsey, I believe, was at about $30,000 a month for maintenance and operations. So, you know, all the things that let the building run. It also has showers and bathrooms. I don't know if additional would be needed. The staffing cost is a little bit higher, but not a lot. It's about, it's very similar. It's 34 staff per week. And then our assumptions have always assumed 3 meals per day. So those costs are there.
And just something that came to mind, when 99 had erected this before, it said, I think they said it took them about 2 days to actually put that space together. So it could be put together quickly. I know that's some question that people had, is how fast can you turn this site on? So that's what it took them.
After the ice was gone,
Yes, after the access.
just for the record
correct.
there. And it actually, it is the staff currently at 99 under Jason Cates. It was under Securitas at the time of the contract, just for full record.
So I think this is my last slide. These are the other options that are particularly from the administration's plan, the navigation center. Last night, the assembly delayed further appropriation consideration to October 11th. There's still the mini grants program. It's a scattered site model. I don't know. I've asked this question. I don't have the answer yet. Is it available to providers with their own location? So if I'm already a shelter provider and I'm turning on additional space, like a gym or something like that, can I take advantage of the mini grants? So if we started to learn that and we learned who was doing that, we would know what the, how it would decompress the overall census we're talking about. But so far we don't have firm, numbers or providers who might have taken advantage of that. And then the portables. So, it's 20 portables at 1 to 2 locations. I don't know of the locations yet. I haven't seen of any identified. And I would call these rough order of magnitude cost on the portables. The tricky thing is staffing. So this presumes 2 staff 24/7 for each portable. Because if people are actually doing their activities of daily living in them, you can't have cameras. I'm actually kind of curious what the restroom situation would be and what the privacy would be for changing your clothes. So assuming just the 2 staff per day per portable at 20 portables, the monthly staffing cost is about $731,000. And that's on the same assumptions for the other staff, that all staff costs being equal. It's just so much staff. It's actually in the number of staff that I think mean that you wouldn't be able to find that much staff.
Maybe we can get some bus drivers.
I do not want to be a competition with people needing, who could also drive buses. That seems fraught. So that's kind of where we're at in the menu of options we've looked at, we've explored. And I want to open that up for conversation. Bob Dole is with us. Bob was the incident commander for Mass Care for a while, so he's intimately acquainted with turning on some of these MOA facilities. We had more questions about that. So with that, I will stop talking. I know I covered a lot. We'll keep the slides so we can shift them as people want to call things up. And I see Jessica's hand.
Hi, thanks, Meg. This is Jessica Parks. I am intrigued. Dempsey, what does that mean in terms of impacts to anyone who may have already had reservations there? Is that, you mentioned that the Ben Boki was the home of the Wolverines. I assume that somebody uses Dempsey, and is that something that with the Sullivan Arena coming back online, maybe they could be shifted? Anyone who had ice reservations already? Or do we just not know that yet?
So I posed that question to the administration as well to get like what the calendar might look like when things might shift. But yeah, you.
We met as the sub task force property real estate people yesterday. The task that I had was to reach out to Dempsey and Boki to get a sense of their demand and leagues. I just spoke to Norman. The guy's name is Norman Long. He's it sounds like he's the interim ice arena manager for both Boki and Dempsey. And he tried to shut me down. I said, I'm calling from the homelessness, the coalition. I'm just like, hey bro, like we're just trying to get some data here, and I don't have a position. So he proceeded to say that he was, super high demand. We got 5 leagues. We're starting tournament play. We're gonna have hundreds of people here this weekend. It's going to get worse. So that's not real hard data, but that's the first blush and contact being made. And I think we could probably get more.
Yeah, and then there were 2 other options. One is during COVID, the municipality turned on outdoor ice rinks. And so that could be part of the calculus, is asking the municipality to fund turning on outdoor ice rinks. And then I believe, so I am not a sports person at all, including hockey and ice and all the things, but I believe there's some private ice in town. I don't know how booked that is. And I believe there's also ice out in Eagle River, Chugiak.
I think is what you're gonna find, and we talked about acknowledging the users of any particular thing is the hockey community, they don't look at like the outdoor ice, high school teams don't even practice outdoors anymore. They practice, all their practices are inside, so they don't like, they're like, what are you talking about? We're gonna play outside. It's hard to get ice. We've always had a thing with ice, and you're gonna have a pushback, which I think would meet or exceed the pushback you had with the rec centers. But they're affluent, expensive sport, and it tends to be aggressive personalities just because of the nature of the sport. And I would expect that you're going to run into some serious problems there.
I saw Bob in the room and then Rob online.
I'd observed the privately owned ice rink down south O'Malley Sports Complex does show some availability on their schedule, not enough to absorb the whole load. There is some white space there on their calendar, though.
I think is what you're running into with that is there's always a period during the day when it's not really being used, or they're using it for pond hockey, but they want it open in the evenings, and then there's a bum rush every evening,
I know, these were some of their core hours, so they're still showing space there, and traditionally, there was lower utilization in Eagle River as well.
It makes sense. I mean, I just got a text from my old hockey league that I shoved up. I'm like, I don't want to manage it anymore.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're getting booked up, and can you send us the minutes? So I think is what you're gonna see now.
Yeah,
That was
we're
just today.
going to. The other thing, hockey rinks don't have the strong single neighborhood impact that you have with rec centers because you have a dispersed population, as we know, using them. I got pummeled as the incident commander and as the mass care director by hockey parents, and saying they're aggressive is an understatement.
They could be obnoxious and
Yeah.
really kind of not attractive at all.
Even when they had their outbreak from the tournament that started at the Dempsey Anderson. So I think we need to recognize we'll have an affluent bunch from across Anchorage saying find something else. But
Yeah, I've always felt like every one of these things has a built-in user base, and they're going to be against it. And then what's the path of least resistance? And so when you start thinking about the old P&A site, it's like, or the Northway Mall, or basically anything that's empty. That's the benefit, which is there's no built-in group. Everyone's just like, well, you're not using it anyway.
Sure, I'll give you the counter to that, which is there's costs. And I mean, there are costs in using municipal buildings and commitments to turn them on now, and suitability. I think that's been the big challenge of trying to get private sites. But yeah, this is all good. Rob and Felix online.
I may have missed it because I was transferring from my phone. I was driving to my desk here. But is there any particular zoning issues regarding the Dempsey's proximity to Romig? And if not, I think we need to, beyond everything that we've said accurately around the hockey culture in town, I think we also need to prepare specific outreach, maybe not so much for West High families, but I'm thinking Romig families may need to be addressed a certain way.
So I don't know of any separation issues, like in terms of by code, there aren't any separation distances for in Title 16 for emergency shelters being separated from schools. And I captured your point about neighborhood-based outreach. I believe there's a fence between the back of Dempsey Anderson lot and the West High track. But that might be something we would want to investigate further if this was a recommendation, is what security measures might we recommend being put in that particular location. So we get toward the potential for different locations, we can talk about the specifics then of what the, any potential recommendation would need to include. Felix.
Thanks. So 3 things. First is I'm going to be attending a community council here in a couple of minutes, so I'm going to be jumping off. second is when it comes to communications, just speaking for myself as part of the comm subgroup, one of the difficulties that we've had is the ever-changing environment in terms of locations. So it's been difficult for us to really do truly robust communications. We've sort of done what we could, but I think the sooner that we can get to true recommendations, the sooner that we can do some really good comms. So hopefully that'll be a good outcome today. And then I've already asked that the comms group meet tomorrow morning so that we can put together that robust comms plan. Then the third thing is it would be great for the task force to consider what it might look like to use the Dempsey, but to start demobilizing it as soon as we can when housing projects come online, or the Arctic Rec Center, or the Fairbanks location, or the Golden Lion. Whenever any of those other properties have the opportunity of coming online, to slowly demobilize that, because I do respect that that is going to be a very controversial site. So if we can plan for that, I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
Felix, before you have to go, can I ask you a question? And that question would be, I think it would be hard to get a provider to commit to a location for less than 3 months, but does that feel potentially reasonable, through the end of the year while we work on these other pieces, so that we can give a provider some assurance that they're going to kind of stand up this workforce and do this work at a location?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Thank you.
Also, you have a comment in the chat. I'm not sure if,
Sorry, I had the.
oh, I
people-
can see that. You're fine.
Why don't you read the
I can
comment in
see
the chat, because I have the people up
You're
to the
fine.
hands.
Shelley Roughton says, the students walk through the parking lot to lunch across Northern Lights every day. They might need to just be redirected to walk along Minnesota. They currently cross without a crosswalk anyway.
Yeah, they do. Thanks, Shelley. That's a good thing to raise. Bob, can you talk a little bit about what you know about when Ben Boki was turned on as an ice rink, and then when it was demobilized? What was the wear and tear on the building? Same with Dempsey, if you're familiar with it.
Okay, Dempsey, we had virtually no issues upon reinstituting it, other than a Muni trailer got stolen from the parking lot with all the cots we had there.
Oh.
So beyond that, the operator there was very effective at avoiding loss or damage to the facility itself. So we turned out, we fenced off the smoking area, if I recall right. We removed the fencing for that. I thought we had some auxiliary cameras there we pulled down. It was, in short, de minimis of what happened there. Also, that was a real low density facility. We shut it down because we never got the surge of folks needing quarantine and isolation services at the time we opened it. By the time we moved into the guest house then for Q&I, once it surged, there wasn't the same will to go back to a congregate setting. Even though, frankly, I'm a tremendous fan of it, it would have saved us some grief downstream. The Ben Boki we used early on in the main response, or initially it was women and special populations over there, single males in the Sullivan. So you had 2 facilities there. As the population ramped down at the end of the summer of 2020, we pulled out of the Ben Boki. Excuse me. By the way, I do not have COVID. Just in case I'm wrong.
That's good.
But just for the record, but as, the Ben Boki did take some vandalism damage inside. It was nowhere on par with the issues that they have with the Sullivan. It does not also, although there's like a $2.5 million repair bill on the Sullivan, some of that's latent earthquake damage, fire systems, and other things that were not caused by the use, or rather things that just weren't addressed. But it takes some work, but it was relatively minor. I want to say very low 6 figures, if that high. And it was immediately usable. We did not have to delay its reuse. Sullivan, at this point, they haven't, I believe, determined what they're going to do going forward. They have bookings, but I'm not sure they have a path to get there to get the facility in service by the time it's needed. That's a question for the new director of economic development, Lance Wilbur, in terms of what that looks like.
Lance Wilbur. He's been around a while.
It just keeps coming back.
Comment from Lisa Sauter, one correction, Bimboki was open first and accommodated men on one side and special populations on the other rink.
Lisa was there, I defer to her.
Okay.
Bob, I have a question, just I'm not sure I understand. Can you clarify what you described as the damage at Sullivan between earthquake versus use? I'm not sure I understood what you.
A lot of the damage at the Sullivan was not caused by the use of being used for those in the homeless shelter. Rather, it was earthquake or other damage that's not attributable to it being used as an emergency homeless shelter,
Thank you.
but rather,
Deferred maintenance.
to be polite, yes.
Well, that's what I understood, but I want to make sure before I check with
That
that.
should be on record, that's on public record, we should actually print that quote and put that out. to the public. This is Nancy, I just wanted to jump in, and just from a programmatic perspective, the Sullivan Arena was never a good facility for this. It was a challenging facility with all of the, you just can't have clean line of sight, and something like a hockey rink or an open building gives you more clean line of sight. That's one of my concerns programmatically about the reloads, is 10 individual reloads does not give you any line of sight, and staffing becomes such a consideration. And so, for the Sullivan would be much lower, on the list. And in fact, I was also there, and it wasn't actually the first place we went, but it was needed. And these open areas, at the risk of offending all of my hockey friends, I know my phone's gonna start blowing up, but these open areas are meant for watching things, and this is, something that makes it a safer.
Pretty durable too. They're very
Yeah,
durable.
I mean, it's hard to. Yeah. Homeless people, I do not believe could be harder on a facility than hockey players and, young people. I'm sorry. It's
That's
just
true.
Just an observation on the reloads. At some point, once you select a site, you don't just have a truck pull up, push it off the back, and it's there and ready to use. You're going to have to survey them in. You're going to have to put in some sort of pedestals for them to be attached to, so they're seismically safe. You're gonna have to run power to those. Those are electrically heated, by the way. So you are gonna have to run power to them. So there is, and by the way, temperature wise, if you're a month out from now, you're doing what's called cold weather concrete treatment. That is a lot pricier and time consuming to do stuff where you have to basically heat each area where you're doing it. So it's not gonna be plug and play even if you have a site.
On the relocatables, before I turn to the hand, so you said they would have to go on some kind of foundation. Does that make them non-ADA accessible as well? Do they have stairs then? Or
Yeah.
could they be flat with ramps?
They can be flat with ramps, so you can
Okay.
otherwise design for that. And they do that now in some of the reloads.
Okay.
They do have ADA accessibility.
They run ramps
Solutions.
on the side and.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Jessica,
I'm gonna take advantage of Bob right now. So on the relocatables, you talked about running power and that they're electric heat. Is there a heating system already in the relocatables, or is that like a space heater type thing? And are there any safety considerations around the heat, regardless of the cost, which I know is gonna be through the roof, I can't imagine. And then kind of on that note with the cost, since they are school district portables, is there any type of information from the school district in terms of what the historical cost to heat one portable is, or would that be all rolled into a larger cost for each school? I'd be interested in hearing from the school district maintenance staff on what their thoughts are on using portables.
Somebody else will have to tell the utility costs. These though have been established use for an educational purpose for kids in the jurisdiction for decades. It is a contained heating system in each of them. They're safe. I mean, the heating system is safe. We haven't put our kids in harm's way for 40 or 50 years, however long they've been there. So I would not be concerned on the safety issue with the heating system. Rather, the issues surround the use where you have each of these small but all these segregated spaces that in terms of the safety of the occupants. Also, at the same time we talk about security, we also have to acknowledge our fire risk. They're not sprinklered, so you're going to have to figure out a way to balance fire watch needs as well as security, which puts your staff in those, all of them, and frankly, that's maintenance intensive.
Would that require, if you don't have a fire suppression system, would that require you to have staff be on fire watch where they're doing the regular walkthroughs and I guess I don't know the implications of having shelter in a space that doesn't have a fire suppression system.
I think whatever you need for security as regular walkthroughs or ideally stationed there would also suffice for your fire watch based on what the fire marshal has previously required.
Okay.
And on the rough order magnitude of costs, I left blank installation costs, insurance and utilities on the relocatable. So the number that I have, that's about $934,000 annually, is primarily driven by staff and crew. So just, I don't have, as Bob said, those costs exist, but we don't have them, and I haven't had time to reach out to ASD. Just 1 second, Hugh. What about sanitation systems on relocatables? Asked by David Kuiper. Sorry.
David, the short version is there aren't any. You have to bring those to the site separately. Does that look like the heated trailers with showers and toilets in them? Does that look like porta potties? I don't know. But the reloads themselves do not accommodate the sanitation surfaces, sanitation needs. You need separate facilities for that on site.
He says thanks. Okay, you.
Strategic, like, I get the sense that this whole portable conversation, and who has actual control of it, or who's controlling the narrative, or who should be in charge of the narrative is the administration.
So this is the administration's option, and we said we would evaluate and talk about the administration's options. So that's why we put it in here to make sure, we also talked about the mini grants, and then a little bit when we asked the question, can providers expand capacity with them? And then the navigation center with that date of October 11th now. And then we talked last time pretty extensively about the aviator, and we know the drawdown plan. I don't think we have any control over that, but we can factor in the drawdown in our planning.
So I guess my point is, it's their baby. It's their thing. It's pretty obvious to me. It's gonna be super expensive. You have to find a site, you have to do this. It's on them. Like, we've identified some sites. I don't even know if they're even listening because they haven't revealed their own, so like, I personally until they're more forthcoming about their stuff and they want our help on it, then why should we spend more time on it? Or we should maybe spend less time on it. Cause I feel like the issue really is we're getting cornered. We already were cornered a month ago or 2 months ago. We're cornered now because we don't have the Sullivan, and there's termination dust, and we really are so far away from negotiating with an actual owner or something that we shouldn't, like, we should just stop talking about the portables. That's just my personal thing. I totally get it. It's part of your scope.
If I could I don't disagree with that at all. I would say though, if what we're trying to do is provide feedback, we need to consider making sure we balance that. Is there a benefit? What are the pros for each of the options as well? Just to
Makes
be
sense. Yeah.
balanced.
Stay abreast.
Yeah, it's much more likely to come up with the things that are wrong,
Right.
but
Right. The fact that you have numbers like the 24/7 and the, 450,000 a month, like, okay, that's solid data right there, or solid, projection. So
2 comments in the chat. Rob Marks had to leave us. He wanted to say he wants to go on record. He has no concept of how the reloads could ever work. Roger Branson asked, have we looked harder at pallet shelters at Centennial? There's a private donor willing to donate 30. So I believe the site group never got any pallet information, if I recall correctly.
that's
Yeah.
true.
He was confirming by head shake.
We've never really talked about it.
Okay. Elizabeth and Linda, what is the status of the mini grants and where do vendors find the solicitation for those grants? Is anyone on from the health department or the administration that could point folks in the right direction? Not hearing anything, so we'll see if we can't dig it up here really quick while we talk and see if we can't point folks in the right direction. I believe it's on the health department's webpage, but we'll get the actual one, the actual URL, and we will paste it in the chat here. So I put that PowerPoint together to drive at the question of oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, just on the Pallet Homes, I think a little bit of research on that. We thought they didn't meet building codes, so we moved on fairly quickly. But also, wouldn't those have the same? I mean, essentially, that's a portable housing. It have somewhat the same issues of the portable housing. Is that correct?
I don't know enough about them.
I take it it's actually new construction. I mean, do they have to construct the things out of, I don't really understand.
So look, John, this is Bob, looking at those. I mean, we do, they would be portable structures, that's true. We do have, for architectural standards, we have a tiny homes appendix K or L to our International Residential Code. You're going to have the same issues in terms of not being able to see clients and attend to their safety needs. Frankly, the highest fatalities we took were in the non-congregate hotels. So you're going to have to accept a challenge there. You're also going to have to heat them with electricity. So you're gonna have to be prepared to run electricity out to all of those tiny homes as you're going there. They are simpler in terms of the foundation system. So I think it's one with a lot of unknowns, but you're still looking at a staff intensive process for those. And also, I guess at least you got I don't know enough about the electrical system to know if you could utilize the existing plugins in Centennial for running the power to them for their heating systems or not. If those suffice, it would considerably ease that part. The other thing is if we're looking at a load of 240, so usually that's one per pallet shelter, even if you put two in, that's 120 of these. You probably got the number on the sites, but there's even just the supply chain, I think, to get that many and to get those set up and what powered in, you do have a time factor there.
Couple of comments. Shelley Rotten, without a code change, pallet shelters fall under the same code as mobile homes. The current proposed code change would not include those. Robert Branson, with pallet shelters, we can engage the folks receiving services to participate in their recovery. Back to Shelley, it takes a bit of time to engineer the site, as Bob is saying. And she offered to send plans for one in LA that shows an example. And Roger suggests they could be heated hydronically. There is gas at Centennial. So I think those would perhaps not be ready at the end of September, which is where I tried to kind of frame our conversation today, given that it's mid-September.
If we look to January solutions, I think there's a lot more possibilities if the reloads or the tinies are viable, or if there's a hotel ML or master lease or something like that. But there's a lot of time that goes into the reloads or the tiny homes once you press go.
Can you confirm then, based on your summary here, Denali and Egan are off the table because of the bookings?
Yes, unless folks think that there's ways to talk about replacement for bookings in those locations, but those are awfully big facilities. I didn't come up with anything off the top of my head, so.
I mean, I can see members of the public or someone asking the questions, so
Yeah,
you might want to at least address
I think
your logic.
Linda has just also ask the question of everyone. So in all of these, so I think one of the reasons the recreation centers were withdrawn and there was a lot of community pushback is where do we put the services? How do you replicate what happens at a recreation center? How do you replicate what's maybe currently booked in at Denina and Egan? I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know where there's also other large civic and convention centers available in the municipality to provide an alternative. And so then that got us into ice arenas and kind of looking at them as the suite of ice arenas and other ice in town. And that's where we landed. And then, of course, the Golden Lion Hotel for MOA sites is there, but that's not really in our control. And we've suggested it as a housing option potentially because we could leverage some federal rental assistance. Yeah, Bob.
I would, I'm just a guest to this group. I'd suggest confirming that UAA is not entertaining using dorms right now. Just an observation there, because they're running less than 50% capacity.
Good suggestion.
I'll also add that families are also looking at UAA for dorms.
Oh, okay.
Can you say that again, Sharon?
Families are also looking at UAA for dorms because we thought of it first, Bob. No.
Sorry, I gave it away.
Make sure that gets in the minutes.
That's exactly what I want to put out there. It's hard if it's open.
APU might also be a place to check.
What was that?
APU, their dorms at one point weren't being used. They may have repurposed them by now.
I think the APU dorms pose some transportation challenges, but it's not something, it's still something we can look at. And my guess is both universities would want like a semester, like on the break kind of activation, just because they wouldn't want to disrupt their current situation, current operations potentially, at least for, if we were talking a large scale versus potentially 12 families. So I am happy to be a part of a group that tries to follow up on that and what its viability might be. Roger provides campers with no other options will be at Centennial until abatement, likely in excess of 100 is my estimate. If that is the case, then I think that utilization assumption that it won't be immediate 100% utilization also holds with some truth.
And you have a hand by John.
John, new hand, sorry.
Sorry to back up a tiny bit on the Pallet Home. So someone said that there's a local group that will donate 30. And I mean, if they already own them, or is this, what do we know about this? I mean, this should be factored in. I mean, I can't imagine, I looked online, about what they were, and presumably they wouldn't have bought them and stored them here, not knowing the challenges with using them. Do we know more about who has these and how accessible they are? I mean, it shouldn't be ignored. I mean, they're certainly part of a bigger package.
So I'm aware of an effort to use Pallet Homes by a group for their own project. And that might be a set of services that would certainly shelter some of the people we are talking about. Yeah, Kathleen McLaughlin. But it is not intended to replace an emergency cold weather response.
So Kat, some more reentry stuff, is that what we're looking at?
I don't have all the specifics on her project, but I could email her and ask.
That'd be part of the overall picture, and I don't want to ignore them. So, but I think for immediate needs, I agree, it's not part of it. Thanks.
I also want to circle back to what Meg was talking about regarding the MOA's guidance on mini grants. I looked on the purchasing department, there's no ITB for it. I looked on their website and the only thing that is there is what they presented, the kind of 4 pages about what the plan is, but no kind of direction on how do you access that program or anything.
We will see if we can't run down the mini grants information and see if it's posted somewhere and then distribute it to the group and possibly get it up on the task force page as well. So that information can be out there, because if providers or others are wanting to put forward plans to, help shrink this population, that's amazing, and change some of our planning assumptions and factors.
I mean, again, to me, it's focus. It's like, it's to just cut to the chase, which is we need congregate housing and we need lines of sight. We need open spaces. And the list to me is pretty short. I mean, this is just me talking, not the sub-task force, but McKenna Shelter. You know, the Salvation Army place down in the well there by Westchester, they have a big gym. And they're probably sympathetic to the cost. The Arctic Rec Center. You know, I think it's private nonprofit owned, right? They may be open to it. They got the pickleball league in there. It's got 500 members. They're gonna raise heck but it's, you know, is it doable? Maybe. Pacific Northern Academy thing out on Bragg. The Denina Center is the argument made in the subcommittee yesterday was, we've never seen it really, it's a huge structure building with multiple spaces, and we've never really seen it 100% occupied at any time. And it seems like if the administration and the assembly were for it, and could it be used? Probably. How much pushback would it have downtown? So that's what it really boils down to. And besides that, I mean, we have other corollary stuff like, you know, Mark Couples and his space for lease, where the Sherwin-Williams paint plant is, and we have the Chelsea Inn. The guy he'd lease out the bottom floor, and it has 11 rooms in it, and, you know, common area bathrooms. It's like, but if we really want, we have to start actually negotiate, you know, except for the muni-owned stuff, we actually have to make offers.
Yeah, I agree, and we're not going to be in the position to make offers. It's going to be up to us to possibly make recommendations where offers, you know, that's between the municipality and whoever, you know, they would want to, I mean, so we're trying to look at recommendations. I don't feel like any of those are immediate, and I think that's why today I was really honed in on the MOA sites, because those feel like the only like potential today things, or September 29th things, because they have much more control over those sites versus going into a negotiation around all of those other options. That's why on the slideshow I put, you know, that those could be, you know, January, you know, in a month, 2 months, it just depends. Like, I think Arctic Recreation Center, like, has a couple of factors, like, would probably want at least a year-long lease, and it would take some time because they are currently programmed.
Right.
And then 11 rooms at the Chelsea Inn, my very first question is gonna be, will it displace people in those 11 rooms?
They're all, you know, I mean, it's a, you know, it's in the category of Bernard Motor Hotel or the Henry House or every other lower echelon place, and they're most of them are day to day or weekly rent, and the landlord the owner seems to be like, yeah, I'll lease it out, I'm a Christian, and you know, I see this as just a different set of clients.
Yeah, and from my point of view, I see that as just displacement of swapping one set of people for another, and we don't get a net gain.
Well, but the thing is, those people that are there do have the means to, they do, you know, I mean, there is a separation between people that actually are able to somehow pay for housing and are even temporarily versus those that are totally homeless.
It's a great point that you said that. So if we look at who's experiencing homelessness, there are folks who are working, who do have means, as well as the social security benefits. Rents are just high and vacancy rates are really low. Sorry, Bob, I saw your hand flash up.
And this may have changed, but just from the time we looked at facilities during the pandemic, facilities or hotels that will rent rooms to justice involved individuals are in short supply if they know about for a longer period there. And I would not want, that's a group that has trouble even when they do have vouchers or are working and getting housing. I think if we're talking about options there, we don't want to shut down access to those in the process.
I totally get it. I would make the counter argument that the way those, I mean, I don't really view Chelsea as an option for it's not congregate, it's not clear span, it's not really what we're talking about, it's on the margins, but he can you can double up on those rooms with 2 single beds,
True.
you know, so you increase the capacity from what it is.
Mhm.
And maybe even it could, you know, I don't know, it's just a part of it.
There's some comments
Excuse me.
online. We'll make sure we catch. Roger suggests the Harry McDonald Ice Arena at Eagle River should be in the mix as well. Shelley says the LA Pallet Shelter project cost 48K per person and was done within city parks, with each pallet shelter only costing 7K from what I've heard. You're looking at an additional 90K in additional costs for each one. Many of Chelsea's rooms are funded by agencies. And I think that went to Bob's point about reentry.
Interesting.
So.
I think the other point too is that when you're looking at hotels that are, that the daily rate is low enough for people to actually access and pay on their limited income, there's not that many hotels that'll do that.
Super tight.
Especially that don't have, you know, other issues like bed bugs or roaches or, you know, even proximity to grocery stores or things that, you know, folks that don't have vehicles need. And so Chelsea Inn, if other agencies are using it, that's the other part is like, that means other folks that aren't with agencies are probably able to utilize that site, whereas they can't go to, let's say, you know, a different hotel that might be $100 a night, like maybe MySpace, which is a great hotel, but it's more costly than the Chelsea
Right.
Inn.
Point well taken.
Mhm.
So if I can help us get to it, maybe coalescing on a recommendation for the short term.
There's one more question about
Okay.
potential sites I don't want to miss in the chat. So Dave Kuiper asks, are state of Alaska facilities that may be available? We didn't have any state of Alaska facilities that I am aware of on our lists specifically called out, and I've not had any recommendations of particular state of Alaska facilities. If you have a recommendation of a state of Alaska facility, all ears.
Can't think.
The railroad. I don't know. I mean, they do have all those offices down there that are probably not.
That was the last one, so, Belinda, and Chris Judy says, we did not add any SOA owned sites to our list, and Dave Kuiper says not currently, so. Something to keep in the back of our heads for sure, though. I'm not sure it was in our line of sight. Thanks. Sorry about that, Belinda.
Oh, no, fine. I think you're at the point where you've got 15 days. And based on what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong, based on what I'm hearing, the likelihood of identifying some new location that you're gonna be able to turn on in 15 days is pretty slim. Right, with the number of people that have been looking at this over even the last few months, much less the last year or so. And so it looks like you've got picking from the lesser of evils at this point. And so how do you look at the sites that you've identified that are feasible to start up in 15 days? And then rank them in terms of kind of the least damage that it causes to the community. Because it feels like that's going to be how you make your recommendation.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah, I think what Belinda's saying is good, but we have to definitely let it be known that we've not stopped. You know, were we to say, all right, the Dempsey's the only one that's going to work in 2 weeks. We got to do it. Hockey's important, but this is more important. You know, that would be the deception. But, you know, we've got other sites that could be ramped up and not too much more time. We don't know yet, but 5151 Fairbanks, that could handle quite a few. You know, PNA, it could potentially, you know, if we consider it not a, you know, you've got the gym there. If we said focus on the gym, make that habitable, and the rooms, just a few for offices or something, that could be good. You've also got the outside, substantial amount of land, perhaps a warming tent. So anyway, to signal that there are other alternatives we just don't know yet, but we're moving forward. And some of those could be potentially, you know, PNA could be within, you know, a month or something. I don't know, but somewhat quicker. And I think the cost of PNA, you know, I think that 15,000 a month seems quite high, and I pity them for having that burden. But you know, you could that doesn't mean that's what we would necessarily have to pay. I mean, if we paid something less than that, that would ease their burden, even if it doesn't cover. There's no reason to think we have to pay all of their costs on that. But anyway, I guess the point is, we still have an active list with some unknowns, and I definitely want to signal that if we say use a hockey rink, say we are aggressively looking for.
Yeah, John, I totally agree. I think I'm seeing that you are going to make some tiered suggestions. First tier is things that are feasible to turn on in 15 days. And then looking at your other kind of potentially viable options based on what you know as of now, because you're trying to tie up some recommendations to be documented next week. Based on what you know right now, if you look at the other short list items, what do you see as the potential time horizon and cost on those? And communicate. We are also looking at these additional locations based on what we know right now. These two could be turned on in 30 days at this approximate cost. Here are the risks. These could be turned down in 60 days, these in 90 days, so really being able to lay that out. And I think it communicates, John, what you're saying is nobody's giving up. Nobody wants to put, if it's the hockey rinks, nobody wants to make it be the hockey rinks again. But
Tough choices.
tough choices, but being able to lay out, as you're saying, that there are some other potential sites, but you don't see any way they're feasible by September 29th.
Yeah, that's a good path. Thanks.
I was heading in the same direction in my thinking about it, that there's going to have to be step A and then step B. And step A has to be something that's under municipal control, because you can just turn it on and you can help those people who are going to be impacted, find different ice time or other things. But I do have to say, the facility that you could turn on and walk into is that Golden Lion. It has beds, sheets, furnishings. It has everything. And I know that's like the roughest one to say, but that thing could be turned on. We could walk into it very quickly.
There's nothing that prevents the task force from making that recommendation. I think,
It's illogical.
it's very logical. I think it's logical to turn it into housing.
So you could lease
Lease
first
so
and
that
then
way you
do
have another
housing.
funding
Yeah.
stream.
I mean,
But-
it has beds and sheets. It has everything in it.
Sure, I would like, if that is the consensus, and I'm totally fine if that is the consensus, that we also offer another alternative, because there will be policy calls made that will be outside of this task force control. And I just want to acknowledge the kind of reality around that property, because ultimately the municipality has to implement whatever recommendations that may be made.
Yeah. If we were in physics and just learning, we are still in the frictionless environment. And it was a task force. There's no gravity and there's no friction. So Golden Lion is the first one my brain goes to, because it's just literally turn on the light.
Also not big enough, though, for everything we need on day one.
But it has ballrooms, so it could have.
We haven't done any cost estimates or anything on a combined congregate, non-congregate facility.
Okay, that might be a good idea. And then second, I would just say Dempsey, because of your clear line of sight, the durability of that building, the nice position it has in the neighborhood, you can redirect the foot traffic and all the things. There's my two.
Okay, just 1 second, I'm taking a few notes. Hugh, and then we've got two hands online.
Really want to focus, it's Belinda right now, Melinda?
Oh,
Okay, good. Glad I got there. Okay, yeah, it's all, she's basically said we should make our recommendations, and the first filter is gonna get it up in 15 days. I think that's great. Like, the list is really, really short. I think we have the makings of that recommendation right now. Like, we should make those recommendations.
And what are they in your mind?
Well, in my mind, it's the Arctic Rec Center, the Pacific Northern Academy, the Denina or the Egan, probably the Denina, and also if the Salvation Army would do their gym over by Westchester and Valley of the Moon, then that would be a good one.
So you're saying those could all be on in 15 days?
Yeah, they're either muni controlled or sympathetic owners, or an owner like PNA has, it's like they've been sitting on this empty building for a long time. They'd probably be open to it if we could move fast enough to doing it. It's a big if. I don't, everyone says the condition's bad. I'm assuming it's heated.
We have a conditions report from Boucher
Okay.
Company from the prior facilitation, and one of the reasons I put use compatibility questions is there was a big HVAC red flag on it.
Yeah.
It said poor.
Okay.
And then also, I don't know the capacity. So what I don't know, I'd just like to tell you what I don't know, because I think that's, when I did congregate shelter budgets, it presumed you were going to be able to do kind of this line of sight situation. And I think PNA is like a hybrid because you've got one gym, there's nowhere to eat, there's no cafeteria in that building, and then it's all classrooms. So we'd have to, like, myself or some providers would have to go in and kind of figure out like what that layout would look like to tell you like how much it might actually cost to run.
We'd have to get after it, but there's enough there that it has some of the 15 days, sympathetic owner, empty, large, like, it's like, okay, we'd have to figure out whether the heating system would work and everything else, but I have it on the list. I view like the Golden Lion, you know, other ones that are on the margins. Like, that's our auxiliary recommendations. Those are like, I mean, I don't know how you want to frame the Golden Line is obvious. It should be at the top of the list. It's a political mess with the mayor and his supporters, and he just dug in, and it's hard, but it's just, we keep presenting it because it's like, it's an empty building you own. Like, you can put it on the main list if you want, but it should be on there too. The other thing I'd say about I like the, you know, I'm not against the Dempsey. I will say this. We had Beans and the Brother Francis shelter for decades. Then, due to COVID, it was more or less, not shut down, but really became not what it was. And then we had, on an emergency basis, Sullivan Arena. It wasn't perfect. It served its purpose. It could have kept serving its purpose. We don't have that anymore. We don't have a congregate shelter. That's the big hole. And whatever we get, yes, we think we're gonna have a big net of solutions, and but it's gonna take a year or a couple years. And so whatever we do, like, they're likely gonna be there for quite a while. I mean, a while, more than we think, more than 3 months, it's gonna be similar to the Sullivan Arena. That's my personal feeling. It just is how it is. It's hard to find, as we can tell, it's very hard to find an alternative to this place. So it will happen again at whatever the end of that term of whatever space we use temporarily.
So Meg, we have some hands up, and then I want to talk a bit about decision-making process around this, maybe can help.
Good.
So,
Jessica and Christian.
okay, it looks like Jessica's on the top of the list.
So I just wanted to say that I think that there's a difference between municipality owned and sympathetic owner. And I'm coming at it from a risk management insurance standpoint, that I think that it would be very challenging even for a sympathetic owner to be able to execute a use agreement or contract, and the municipality and that owner to have all of the proper insurance in place in 14 days. So I feel like the tiering needs to push municipal owned properties higher than sympathetic owner. I also agree that we should not stop our work, and that if we were to put forward Dempsey and our conversation is, we intend this to be short term, we go into it not the way we went into the Sullivan Arena. We go into it saying, we're planning for its closure the day we open it. And we are nonstop continuing to look for another congregate shelter facility, because I agree, we need a congregate shelter facility as well. The idea of a mixed use, I think, is interesting. I haven't been to the Golden Lion in a really long time, so I'd have to see that space again to think about how that configuration could work. And I don't know, I don't think we need to get into a whole ton of details on some of that. I think there's some challenges in somebody having a position of authority assigning someone who gets a cot versus who gets their own room, and having to have some tiering in place there. And I just from a service provider standpoint, I think that brings its own challenges, but I do think that municipal owned facilities are probably the only thing that's going to be turned on in 14 days. And I don't know if anyone, I've not looked down the attendee list, anyone, if Andy might be on, has any ideas of how quickly the muni would turn a contract around if it was a facility that wasn't municipal owned.
Good point.
I can talk as best as I can about it. It's not a quick process. If it's over, I believe, $5,000 or $50,000, which any of these would be, it'd have to be a sole source justification. And if we were following proper Title VII procurement, we would actually do a request for proposal or an ITB to run that facility. Additionally, it would have to be approved by the assembly. So then you're talking at least a month. I mean, even the quickest. Think of the ITB. The ITB, when it was published, it had to be out for 14 days. So if it, I know it was pulled, but this is just to give you a sense of the timeline. Those 14 days took us to September 23rd. That is 4 days before the assembly meeting, and it would have to be a laid on the table item. And it's been very clear that laid on the table is not a preferred method of going through things. So that is like the quickest timeline, and probably with it being published on the 9th, it wasn't going to even make it to laid on the table because there has to be a buyer, a purchaser. There's so many different things that have to happen to make sure that the funds are used correctly. So 30 days is minimum, but in reality, for a proper RFGP, it's about 60 days is what I plan for most of mine.
Thanks, Andy. I think that's helpful information to have. Chris Schutte.
Hello, Chris.
He's trying to unmute, I think.
Is it working now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow, that was embarrassing. Sorry about that. I just wanted to echo what we've heard in previous meetings about taking a distributed approach. Certainly, distribution was something that the property selection group considered heavily. We looked at these proposals, proposed ideas on maps to get a sense of where things were located, et cetera. And I don't want to lose sight of that. So to build off of the comments we heard about perhaps we focus our attention on one MOA owned and one not MOA owned property. I'd like to reiterate that we said we wanted to distribute these, so perhaps we consider 3 or 4 options that we seriously vet if there are 3 or 4 that are viable at this point. And as part of that, we may need to look at them through the lens of not what's the maximum capacity, but what's a workable capacity, and spread that maximum capacity among more sites. I have to imagine that introduces some additional operating expenses, but I would defer to you, Meg. You put a lot of time into the pro forma, and I don't know if it would be an apples to apples to say, you know, take 260 people or 360 people and spread them across 4 sites, and it's still going to cost the same thing. I don't know, but I just wanted to reiterate that it was important for us as a group to identify sites that represented a good geographic diversity, and I'd like to see that continue. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Just quickly, the answer is no, because staffing, particularly for congregate, is built on ratios. So 1 to 30, 1 to 50. So, you know, when you tip over to that 31st person or that 51st person, that's why when I ran the idea of 2 ice rinks in one location, it was overall not that much more staffing because you were already building off of those ratios.
Economies of scale.
And I am, yeah, thank you. I'm really not good at explaining how that works, but I can do the math with help from my friends like Jessica. Owen.
Hi, all. I have to leave at just before 1, and so I do have a request from the comms committee that should be considered by the group, which is that we are getting consistent requests from media to speak about activities of the task force. We believe that it is important that the task force identify a spokesperson who can speak to the media on behalf of decisions or recommendations that are made, and that we would prefer a spokesperson that is not wearing multiple hats, such as assembly member, to avoid the appearance of a conflict, and also to be maybe less political. So either a service provider or a regular participant of this meeting who also runs a shelter, or I think at one point also Lisa Aquino's name was floated, who's offered to help, bring into the fold at a certain decision point. So I don't want to derail the conversation happening right now, but if it could be circled back to before the end of the meeting, or at least considered, it would be appreciated by the comms group and by the requests we're receiving.
Thanks, Owen, I captured that.
There is a couple of things in the chat from Randy Schultz off the wall, but do we have we looked at the new SWS facility? And then there was a comment about that one to Randy from Christopher Shutt, which is it's not scheduled for completion until spring of 2023. So just wanted to acknowledge those two things.
I actually want to go back and capture a few of the other comments. Roger says if we could engage and keep our target population, they could potentially aid us in the transition. Their ability and natural desire for community can be channeled for the benefit of all, population informed. Keep them informed. And John says the Arctic Rec Center will not be available. P&A, though no confirmation on that for immediate availability. So, Owen, is your hand still up?
Sorry, I had one other comment in my notes that is to circle back to a prior thing that I would ask the task force consider a part of the recommendation. If a location such as Dempsey is identified, that a demobilization plan is also recommended to the assembly. That there's, I think Felix mentioned it and Jessica mentioned it, but I think that could be part of a recommendation that we. A very wise person named Bob Dole told me he wishes there was a plan to shut down Sullivan before Sullivan opened. And I would like to share that advice with the group.
Thanks, Owen. And see some nods and smiles about that, I think.
I would also just like to say that the planning for emergency shelter began every year, at least for the past 6 years, in April. And it came to the same crunch that we're having here. Not that I'm happy we're having this crunch, but this is the dilemma. It's hard. This is hard.
Yeah.
Okay, some bring us back to process. And this was all really good information, and appreciate everybody's work to run down the information and be able to share it. I think it's been really productive. I think you have 3 tiers to talk about. All right. The first is locations that are physically appropriate and can be turned on purely with a municipality decision by 9/29. You don't have to involve anybody else. You can turn it on in 15 days and it's appropriate. So what are those locations? I think that's one bucket. I think the second bucket are those sites that you absolutely know are physically appropriate and you've got definite owner interest. That's like your close second tier. Your third tier are some that you've got reason to believe they're physically appropriate and you believe there's owner interest, but you don't know that sitting here today. You've still got some work to do, and I think that's your third tier. And then there's some others that come after that, but I think with what you're trying to do right now and making it immediate, I think those are your 3 buckets that you can put forward.
How do you reflect the housing that's likely to come online? Is that tier 2 then?
Is it going to come online by the 29th?
No, not immediate. Definitely
Okay.
not tier 1, but I'm just curious.
I think that plays into the next part of the conversation.
Oh, okay.
If they're not, because what I'm talking about right now are because we started this meeting today saying,
Yeah.
we need to be geared up to make recommendations about what can happen by the end of the month. And so that's part 1 of this conversation.
Oh, I think I can see what you're saying. So tier 1 is maybe immediate recommendations. Tier 2 and tier 3 we're still working on these because I guess I don't want to lose.
No, we're not
housing in this
losing.
mix.
Yeah, we're not losing anything. It's a way of saying, we looked at this whole gamut when we look at what can physically be done by the 29th, our two criteria are they're physically appropriate, and we know that. And all it will take is action by the municipality. We don't have to negotiate with anyone. We don't have to gather really any information. The municipality can make the decision
Austin building.
That's tier one.
as tier one. So those are, I mean, those are almost the no-brainers. There's some community and political challenge with them, right? And I don't think you've identified anything where there's no community political challenge. If there was, I'd make that like tier one
That'd be number
plus.
one.
But I don't think you've identified it. Maybe you cite that as one and say, we didn't identify one. And then you come down to the next, like we'd have to overcome some community blah, blah, issues.
You have two hands, Belinda, whenever you're ready.
Okay, and I'll walk through this again, just to make sure we're on the same
No.
page, and then I'll shut up.
No, please don't.
Okay, and then a close next tier, if for whatever reason you can't overcome the political, are there some that are physically appropriate and have definite owner interest, but it will take more than the municipality making a decision? It's gonna take the owner to engage and make some decision, right? And it may take some more, formal review of the site from a permitting standpoint or something, right? So it takes a little bit more work. And then your third one are some that you still think are potential, but you don't see them having a potential by the 29th. And I think that's where you get into your potential housing.
I actually think housing, oh, so you still.
Yeah, she's still just focusing on the immediate.
I'm
don't
just
even
focusing
think-
on your immediate one.
I guess I didn't think there were any tier twos that could ever be turned on by the 20.
I don't think there are
Based
either.
on what
No.
Andy said.
No, she said 30 to 60 days. I mean, it's like, if you can't get the tier one, you have to go to tier two and then you're behind.
The standard too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in tier two.
yeah.
I think everything comes to tier three, and then you'll talk about that bucket and we can
So
bucket
could
it.
we refine maybe tier two to be to be turned on, within, so we talked about, anything being a 90-day contract, so you could get a provider willing to do it. Tier two, something that could come on within that 90-day period, and then tier three is anything with a longer lens.
That's more realistic. Yeah, I think. I mean.
And,
it's-
and I think those that fall in that 90 days probably are those where you're pretty sure they're physically appropriate and you've got some good owner interest.
So actually probably about.
I mean, here's the deal. I mean, she's totally right and the work does not end for us, but we're gonna focus on tier one, right? Everybody. And then in the meantime, the tier twos, you really have to start negotiating with those people.
Right now.
Like, yeah, because you're already 90 days out, just starting right now. I mean, if you wait until you see if tier one's like,
Okay, so the hands online, Josh from the Covenant House.
Hey, yep, I just wanted to, and I don't know which tier this fits in, but like things like like we would be able to bring 25 beds for 18 to 24-year-olds in our gym. And that would just be, I mean, that's not Muni owned, but it's also not necessarily I mean, we're more than a friendly owner. So, like, I just think I don't know what category that fits in, but with the dollars, we could pretty quickly, before 90 days, I don't know about by 29, that's what we had hoped to do, but, like, I don't know. And I don't know if there's other providers that have any of those additional types of things.
who is John with?
Thanks, Josh.
Last guy.
Oh, sorry.
Josh is with Covenant House.
Oh,
So
okay.
they've got some changes where
Nice.
they can do,
Yeah, okay.
18 to 24. So I think that straddles right at the end of tier one and right into tier two. And we can go ahead and, actually, Jessica, I believe it's a little bit higher than the mini grant because they're hoping to serve more people than the mini grants proposed, but we could they already have a proposal written. We can just put it right into the task force recommendation.
And those would not have to go through the city contracting process at all.
Covenant House is like the game in town for
Okay.
these services, so in theory, the municipality could choose to sole source with them or whatever. That's gonna be the muni's call, so I think it's tier.
So again, it's the Muni can make the call about whether it can be done immediately. So you got an owner who's saying, I'm in, I'm ready, I can hit the switch tomorrow, but it's the Muni's total decision, nobody else.
Yeah. John, and then Nancy.
Yeah, so on the even municipal owned buildings, if we are looking for an operator to run them. So what we just heard, I think from Jessica, was that it could take, several weeks to get there. Is that sped up if there's an emergency declaration? I mean, how do you speed that up to make it all happen in 2 weeks?
So I know there's mechanisms under Title VII, under health and welfare, where you can waive formal procurement rules, but again, that's something though fully within the municipality's purview to do, so. I think that went into play previously in one of the implementation pieces of the prior facilitated agreement, if I remember correctly. We've been at this for so long, but I believe that there was one of those waivers involved, process previously. Sounds like a policy call, not for us, but for the MOA, but that's in their discretion. Nancy.
I just wanted to put a note, and I'm sort of thinking back to your suggestion about looking for all the spaces where we can increase capacity where it exists. And so some air traffic control for this system to make sure that we are getting people out to the places where they could. So if Chelsea can take some, that we maximize that, maybe that goes through the landlord program, or, that we just make sure that we're using everything that's in existence while we do all the tiers. I think that's just a good system thing to recommend.
I can capture the availability of the landlord housing project, emergency rental assistance and some of those things in tier 2. None of those are 29th, but they definitely could be a 30 to 60 turn on depending on what we identify.
Yep, absolutely.
Can we see a hand, Lisa?
Yes, hello, everyone. I know this is something that we did discuss in our property committee, and I just wanted to point it out. Beans does have a master lease on a site in Midtown that could pretty easily accommodate 40 people in a semi-congregate, non-congregate blend. It has some one-bedroom apartments and some congregate rooms as well. It is immediately or could be made immediately available. With some very minor things such as, twin size beds, but cots could be used in the interim, that sort of thing. So, if we're looking for at least 40, 50 people, probably more in the 40-ish range, it would certainly be an option. And I just wanted to put it out there. We're planning to use it for workforce development, but I think right now this is the greater need, and we can consolidate our workforce development people at our other site.
So just to clarify, Lisa, this would be low barrier shelter that you're giving as an option for 40 folks?
Yes, could be.
Is this the Ide Street location?
Yes.
That by the 30th, by the end of the month?
Yeah. Yep. Could be.
So I think like with the Covenant House proposal, if you have the full proposal, I think then that needs to probably just be included in the recommendation. Because I mean, that's a firm proposal to then have the municipality put into the mix.
I don't see any other comments, so I'm gonna run through, based on what I'm hearing today, how I think they stack into the tiers, and you guys can correct it. I'll give us a starting point, so pick up your pen. Tier 1, I'm gonna start with just listing the municipality-owned facilities: Golden Lion, Dempsey, Bokie, Egan, Denina. And you can talk about your preference and how you might rank those against each other.
Can you do that one more time?
Sure.
Because I'm gonna put it on the screen for everybody
good.
else.
Okay, tier 1, Golden Lion, Dempsey, Bokie, Denina, Egan. And that's somewhat the order that I heard the arguments about. And then Salvation Army, Gym, potentially.
It's tier 2 now?
No, tier 1 still.
Okay.
And then I put these smaller sites that were just mentioned, like Covenant's House and Beans, where they said, we don't have a room for 300, but we might have room for 20 or 40, and we can turn it on by the end of the month if we get funding. So I would put those in this.
Can I get the pause button as the person who's got to write this thing?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit worried about having to write out full explanation for,
You don't have to. I'm just putting this in front of the group to talk
Yeah,
about.
just to
oh, okay, I'm like thinking like these are
No.
going into the report and I have to go and.
go with it. She's going, tell her yes.
Yeah, you have to. No, I'm trying to,
I don't know that I know enough about all of these places.
and I'm just trying to help you come to consensus on which ones do make it into
Okay,
the report.
sorry, I didn't mean to
Okay?
get ahead of you, I was worried that I'm not gonna.
Yeah. And then we'll capture the comments that take them out of play so that those can be referenced.
One more point of clarification. This is what you're saying. Tier 1, MOA, these are the ones? Yes?
And
Okay,
Salvation Army Gym. Because we've heard it's available and could be turned on.
These are non-muni owned.
It's not muni owned, but what
But
I
they're
think
in
I
the, they're
heard.
in the
Yeah, but they're in
nonprofit business. It may be a little bit easier. They probably have the insurance. Who knows? But
We
it's.
haven't heard from them though.
Oh, I thought they spoke up. That's not who spoke up.
Uh, Well, no, I mean, when we talked about it in the subcommittee, I thought Mr. Welton said that, like, that's kind of the munis thing and they're already talking to him. So
I mean, I hear they're applying for a mini grant, but I don't understand, again, that now we're in a weird intersection, like, I don't know how
Right.
many or whatever, so I don't know how they play into a recommendation.
Then I'd move them to the second tier.
yeah,
so this is.
or we call them and find out as soon as possible. But yeah, I'd say tier 2 then.
In tier 1, I would put the couple of folks that did speak up. I think it was Covenant House and I think it was Beans.
Yep.
That said, we have something smaller, but if we got the thumbs up, we could do it. We think we could do it by the middle of the month or by the end of the month.
Yep.
So that's what I think I heard. Now it's your chance to talk about those. And if that's wrong, take them off the list and say why. And then that gives Meg, I think, what she needs to be able to draft a report.
Can you look at the chat? I think somebody's there, but I can't see it
Yeah.
and do the things.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
So I think Josh's scenario is where the mini grant question comes in. Jessica said that about Covenant House, but their thing is a little bit different. John Weddleton from John from Shelley, emergency procurement. Roger Branson, I think the Mac Center should be on tier 1 as well. In Eagle River.
Oh, okay.
What is the Mac Center?
It's a hockey rink in Eagle River.
I would say no, we gotta stay in Anchorage.
Yeah, I agree. I get it. The theory that we could bus people out there. The population is here. It might work. It's such a reach. It's like, we have to cut the wheat from the chaff right now, and to me, it doesn't qualify, but that's just me.
Roger says it's the least utilized ice. I think it might be worth discussing in the overall ways to mitigate impact.
Sure.
Ice.
Yeah, sure.
Because then people with means would be able to drive to it.
That's true. I mean, but that's not really, it's not a candidate. If the muni said, yeah, okay, we can start shifting some of these leagues out to the Eagle River, it doesn't really have it's not gonna be a place for, cots.
Yeah, that's what I
So
would say.
that's why it's not on tier 1, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, and so what I would do, Taria, with the document is I'd put it on the list and then I'd put no. Needs to be in Anchorage. That's your reason for saying it's not on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If I put mine on the screen, that's what I'm doing.
Got it.
I mean-
Just come sit next to you.
I might need to sit next to you. I'll come over.
Yeah, I mean, I think this list needs, I mean, it's all good. I mean, it's like, we have a whole other list and we have a maybe, no's and everything else. And then we have these new additions to the overall other list. Like, we're just trying to make a pure list here of like, these are the ones, this is one we're gonna recommend.
So let's start with the Golden Lion.
Are you gonna do tier 2 too, though? Or-
Let's get our
Okay,
tier
tier
1 and make sure
okay.
you agree with what's in tier 1.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So somebody said Golden Lion should be top of the list. I put it top of the list.
That was me.
Okay, Golden Lion is physically appropriate. Muni controls the decision.
I think we should say physically appropriate for non-congregate in the moment, because that's what we know the
Okay.
specs for.
And so does it stay on this list as something you put in your report and you say, this is a feasible option? Here are the pros and cons.
I think so.
There, folks online, I'm gonna make sure you guys are chiming in as we talk about whether or not to include something on this list, because this is gonna indicate how we start to draft this thing up. So if you have any objections to Golden Lion being on the list or listed as physically appropriate for non-congregate and MOA control, please say so now.
You can
this
also
is
use the
John.
reaction button.
Yeah, John.
You know, I think we can't deny that it's ready to go. So it probably needs to be on the list, though the stipulation when it was purchased that it would be not be used for a homeless shelter will be a big hurdle to get over.
So there's a distinction apparently, and we can raise it as an issue, but a distinction's been made about how that restriction went on for transient, homeless and transient shelter versus emergency shelter. Also, non-congregate could always be a housing situation as well, if we wanted to address that particular limitation.
But legally, it might be right. Publicly, the people do not see the difference.
Yeah, I think that
Oh, I know.
if this list, I assuming that it's gonna get covered in the press and like, and I get it, we just put the golden line on there and it's immediately gonna be shot down in my personal opinion by the mayor. We can't anticipate it, but like maybe it's a softer thing just to put it lower down on the list. Like instead of like, okay, you keep saying no, but we're gonna keep shoving it in your face, like you should maybe like put it lower. Just, you know, it's just an idea. I mean,
I would be, I mean, I think
Okay.
it's reasonable to put it as number 2. I think it has the same, some of the same complications as some of the other ones in the list, or, I mean, all things being equal,
I think
I
community
think your 1
will,
and 2s are interchangeable.
it's all good. I mean, it's gotta be on the list. I'm just talking about maybe a fine tune, but as long as it's on the list, it's all good.
Maybe just make the list alphabetical.
And I think unless you have something that you clearly have consensus is your top recommendation, then I would just say these are in no particular order, but here's the pros and cons. If you as a group do think that there's one that clearly rises to the top, then you should say that, and you should say why.
That's good.
So Dempsey,
Well, can I just ask a logistics question about, let's say we turn on Dempsey, because Bob's comment about the trailer that had the cots in it that got stolen. We don't have a bunch of cots just sitting around, do we?
I believe so. I believe the MOA with the ITB was planning to provide cots and some certain things.
Okay, because the fact that the Golden Lion is furnished, I understand all the other complications around it, but there could be some cost savings with that.
so I know when there was a conversation about when we first talked about this last year for the demo out of Sullivan, Dempsey and Boki came up. We had the same conversation. And that group, as they were going through the screening, said, they're both feasible, but we would only do one of the two. We wouldn't do both. And so that's one way you can also come at this, is saying, we think as a group that this is viable, but we would recommend you only do one of the two, not both. I'm just giving that as an alternative because it is what the other group came up with last year.
I'm sorry, but I have one other quick question. So the number we're thinking about, if you said earlier in the meeting that we were thinking about 70%.
That was
Come
my
in, I
best
mean, that
guesstimate.
seems like a good number. So that's 245 if you use 350. So that's size, I think, is another piece of this.
So the Golden Lion is, I believe, 85 rooms. And so the most you can do is roommates. So that would be 85 times 2. And that would have, usually it's agreed upon roommates, but
Yeah.
roommates, so that would be, let me just get my calculator.
170.
Yeah, 170. Don't do math off the cuff, especially, no. So that would be that one. Yeah.
So Dempsey, Boki, what's the consensus of the group on those?
I think we make a good point about Dempsey and Boki for, only using one rank. And I think with Boki being the home of the junior team, I think that is a non-starter, honestly. I think that trying to work through that will be an exercise in futility.
It's the Wolverines, Julia.
Yeah. I think those are legit. I mean, the bottom line is they're both available and we're recommending them, and these hard choices have to be made by the powers that be. And it's just similar to Nina Egan. It's like, take your hockey rinks or take one of your convention centers, but they're both on the list and, we're making this recommendation.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next ones, and I think you're right, I would do the same thing, I'd say Denina or Egan.
Yeah. Yeah, you could actually,
And then decide as a group, do you agree with that or not?
I don't agree. Either should be on because we have other facilities with showers. And showers are going to be a tremendous complication to add anywhere in the winter.
We'll hold on here. What are the other places with showers?
Dempsey has showers. They have
Okay.
locker rooms. Boki has showers.
And Denina and Egan do not.
Correct.
Well, I mean, I agree, and it's important consideration, obviously, but once again, we're just talking about being able to stand up a place or by the 29th, and like, Denina might be able to do that, and maybe they won't have showers there. Is no showers a deal killer
So
completely?
it is in our initial criteria for emergency shelter, ability to have showers of some sort.
Persons experiencing homelessness, have a level of dignity also, and they want to be able to clean themselves, and so.
All good. I just wanted to know if it was a hard filter or not. It sounds like it is.
Is there a potential to bring in those facilities
We know
quickly?
of one available shower trailer. It has some weather limitations. It shuts off at a certain number of degrees and it's not terribly big.
Okay.
And it has no handicap accessibility.
Yeah, it's not ADA.
And when you're talking 245. I'd like to raise one other thing about Denina, and I can't remember Egan's situation, but carpeting in those facilities is not a good mix for our population. That would probably represent a pretty significant cost
Big time.
to fix, yeah. And that's another sort of thing that drives toward these concrete floors of the ice rinks, it's easier to mitigate bed bugs and whatnot.
Yeah, I think Megan, we can capture this in your report. We did consider these and here's quickly why
Okay,
they're off the list. And I think that helps to demonstrate the comprehensive
sure. Okay,
review that
I'll
you
make
did.
a chart.
Yeah. Okay,
Let's see, I'm gonna capture a couple of comments here. Yarrow Silvers, I don't think politics should dictate where on the list if it's physically available in response to Gold Lion. Beans also owns Cots and Totes. Taylor Hockey officially not moving to Sullivan. Apologies, her mic isn't working. The answer to that, Taylor, is unclear. We're not sure. We don't have definitive.
I'm assuming that they're practicing at the Boki which is a much less expensive place to rent, and they are playing the games at the Sully. That's just a guess, but that's how it's.
Sully's not ready yet, right?
I
Isn't that
know.
what we
Right.
just heard?
But they're heading that direction, right? And they had their games at the Boki last year.
John says the Denina ground floor is concrete. Chris says Egan has carpeting, Denina not on the ground floor. Both facilities could also accommodate a shower trailer indoors. So that's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But we still would need to find accessible shower trailers.
Yeah.
So, good point, Chris. Thanks. I hadn't thought about how large they are and that things drive into them. Intent is to have the solely ready for Wolverines' first game in October, according to John Weddleton.
I say we take that MAC off the list. It just confuses the list. We're looking for things that meet this criteria of community controlled and physically appropriate. It's just,
And John says a company in Fairbanks has shower trailers available now. John, if you've got information, if you can send it to me so I can add it into various scenarios for the costs in the pro formas. I think that'll be important. And then I assume those just get trucked down, but whatever those logistics might be.
Yeah, they're
Thank
actually,
you.
if you scroll way down in that spreadsheet, we've got some rows for non-location issues like the Pallet Homes and stuff. At the very end, I have some notes from a conversation I had with someone there. I think I put portable showers, quality sales, 40-foot container, 7 showers, $2,000 per week.
Okay, I will go back to the list and dig it up.
Okay, so based on this, does Denina or Egan stay on the list, but with some caveats.
I vote they stay on the list.
I agree.
It sounds like
I
Denina might be
want
slightly
to
preferred, but
put in, you know, if we were talking about not concentrating services, you know, there's, I mean, it's to be a policy call for municipality, but Denina and Egan and Boki are all downtown.
So that's good, right?
So, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Concentrating services of Brother Francis is already downtown, Downtown Hope Center is downtown. A lot of response is already downtown. It's just something to be considered as, will be considered.
Yeah. Makes sense.
okay, so this is what your top list boils down to based on this conversation, right? It's Golden Lion, Dempsey, Denina. Based on what I heard, not based on opinion, my opinion.
2 years.
You can boil it down further, which is the Golden Lion, a hockey rink or a convention center.
I think with the
Yeah.
downtown concentration issue, then if you take the then you take Denina off, and so you've really only got Golden Lion or Dempsey.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Meg. We're not making a qualitative, real judgment or weighing in on any of the other ones. We're just saying it's physically appropriate in this. And so like, yeah, I get it. It's concentration service downtown. This is our recommendation. They have to make those hard choices about that. Like, I don't, it's like it waters down the scope of this list, but I'm fine with it being on there. It's just that we didn't make a value judgment about any of the other ones, except for maybe the carpet or, you know, we didn't say anything about like, well, you know, the hockey community is gonna be pissed or, you know, something else about the other ones, you know, it's just like, that's all part of the mix and we understand these are hard and here's our recommendations.
I just know there's a policy document by
Okay,
that, and it came up in the prior facilitation and all of the prior work that there's a general policy of the municipality as passed by the assembly, not to concentrate services downtown. So that's why I was mentioning.
well, every one of these is downtown, kind of, except for the Golden Line.
Dempsey's not.
Right.
And so I think that's, and unless folks disagree with what I think I heard, you're saying Golden Lion, Dempsey, and these other smaller sites kind of rise to the top.
Yeah,
They all have some potential issues. You did identify a couple of other locations that fit this criteria, but they're concentrated downtown or they have some other downsides. And so you kind of put them a step down. And so you don't really recommend them, but you
Yeah.
acknowledge them.
yeah, that's true.
I think I can format that. I get it.
Okay. Anybody disagree with that? And jump in to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting your thinking. Okay. And then we move to the, oh, somebody's got their hand up.
Yeah, thanks guys for catching Chris's hand.
Thanks. I just wanted to add to Meg's comment about the assembly resolution directing a distributed approach. We are also trying to do less harm. There's probably a better way to phrase that, but minimize the disruptions that are caused by some of these decisions. We had a robust discussion around who gets displaced when you pick certain facilities over others. And I do want that to be reflected maybe in the notes, because we had a very, I think, meaningful conversation about if Dempsey or an ice rink were to be selected, are there alternatives for the user groups that'll be displaced? Whereas in places like the rec center, there's not really an alternative. Maybe for Denina, that would also have to be reflected. You know, who's being displaced and can it be accommodated elsewhere? I think, I don't know the answer to that. I have no idea what the booking schedule is like at Denina right now, but I do think we should at least reflect that we're considering how we're displacing certain other user groups in these decisions. And if we can come up with alternatives, it makes that choice a stronger choice.
And I think with that logic, then you acknowledge the rec centers as a tier 1, but you say they're already off the table.
True.
And this, one thing I wanted to add, this is Julie, I'm on a communication group. we've met with lots of, about 70 people that are in shelters, and about the location, it was interesting. There wasn't any one place. People like, they just wanted to be where there's transportation. That was really big, where they could get to services and where they were warm and had food. So I thought it was really interesting that they didn't say, we want this place. It was all over Anchorage. And so the big thing was they wanted to be near transportation, which Golden Lion or Dempsey would be, I think.
Yeah, so they want to be near transportation and near the services they need
Yes.
and be warm and sheltered.
Yes. Yeah, that's
what you heard.
big. Yeah.
So near transportation with the Golden Lion, but I think you also need to put something there about near very dangerous intersections.
Yes.
If you are going to have people coming and going a lot. It is the most dangerous intersection in the state. So, Roger, you got your hand up.
Thank you. And, you know, I just want to add into the conversation while we're talking about all the different user groups that we're going through gyrations to make sure everyone gets involved and, you know, we do the least damage possible. We're missing out our target population, which are the people we're serving, that they are 350 human beings, and finding services that's going to work for them, which first engages them and allows them to feel part of a community so that they have pathways to healing and to recovery, should be a prime consideration as well. And it's very frustrating to hear that is kind of fallen by the wayside or not taken up as a priority, because what are we doing here? Are we trying to help these folks, or are we just trying to warehouse them and plan to warehouse them for the rest of their lives? Thank you.
So Roger, what do you think is missing that would be available at the end of the month? And you know, be able to turn on because Centennial is turning off.
I understand that, but in the conversation about the community, we need to keep the voices of the people we're serving front and center as well. Or, you know, they're just having stuff happen to them that they have no control, no say, no input on, and you know, to expect them to, you know, we're going to come up with a final solution that we're going to force upon them and they're going to like it, you know, well, beggars can't be choosers. And if that's the mindset we're going into this with, we're spinning our wheels before we even started, because these are human beings with real feelings, with real emotions, with real challenges. And I'm sorry, I just jumped on the bandwagon. I'll stop now. Apologies.
No, Roger, I really appreciate you bringing that up. I think it is helpful to make sure that we keep that consideration in the room. I do have a question for you. This is Belinda, and it's just, again, from my understanding. So I think based on what I've heard, there is a limited number of facilities that are going to be available immediately. The Golden Lion and Dempsey, maybe Bokie, Denina, Egan. If you look at it through the lens of people who have that lived experience, how would they rank those locations?
Well, the people with lived experience are not the ones spending the night in the campground.
Okay, well, so the people at the campground, the people at the campground today, that the people we're talking about, how would they rank the locations that you all have identified that are actually available and feasible? So you've got Golden Lion, the ice rinks, the conference centers. How would the people at Centennial choose between those locations?
I have not been tasked with asking them that question, nor do I believe anybody else has. I would be very reluctant to speak up for them. I think there would be pluses and minuses to all, but I think what they would all say is they would like to be engaged and they would like to have some say in self-directed care and or the ability to start participating in the services they receive in ways that are meaningful to them. And that, you know, there are some bad actors that mix in with them. We can't control that, but they know who they are and they can help us if we engage them and give them reasons to make choices that step up and fulfill community standards. And that's been my big lesson this last month of doing breakfast is that, you know, the folks that come in there, they want that chance for community. They want to share a meal in a way that they can relax, and they are willing to be polite and go through some adjustments to their behavior so that the community standards can be enforced and they can have the sense of community. So
I don't want to, I don't want to cut you off, Roger, and we don't have to end this conversation, but I do need to do a quick time check with everyone. It is 1:30.
I'm gonna have to step out right at 1:30.
So we can't go any longer. Okay. So how do you want
So
to?
can I pose this question? Are we comfortable with me writing up the tier 1 and trying to get it out to the assembly and the administration, you know, by week's end, so that they have time to start whatever processes, conversing among themselves? We can refine it when we meet on Monday, of course, but kind of give them the heads up, like, hey, and actually today's Wednesday, yeah, I could probably even do it by Friday morning. If I'm being ambitious.
Hey, for it? You guys for it?
You know, or is there any objection to that? And I still see that John's hands up. So, in terms of if there's an objection or something else.
No objection to getting something done by Friday. I just want to briefly address Roger's comments. You know, the current mission is it's getting cold and we have a responsibility to provide a warm place for people. And it's not really that long range vision, which is encompassed in the agreement from last November, which includes, you know, the guest house, a whole package of things. So this is a little tiny subset of the big picture that Roger's talking about. So, but right now, we got to get some warm place for people, very much focused on that.
Well, and I wonder if you can somewhat address Roger's concern by referencing what you learned from the surveys that you did. And so I mean, you guys did make an attempt to get some of that voice into the room, and you have some data that you can reference.
Roger says he concurs with John, and Shelley is volunteering Bob and Chris to assist me with details on any of those facilities. How nice of you, Shelley. I will do that.
Happy to help.
I will.
I like the emojis. That's cool.
Tap into a few of you for some eyeballs on this before it goes out, realizing it will be basically a small summary of the larger work that we're doing, and we'll just get to it. And look forward to seeing you all on Monday. One of the things that I have a request of is between now and Monday or Tuesday, if you were working on a subcommittee, if you could draft up a paragraph or two about what you did so I can include it. I think that is really important. I plan to put appendices of what each subcommittee, you all did such amazing work. I want to make sure we're capturing it. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank
all.
you, Meg.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great.
Yeah, we actually made some good progress today.
Good job.